Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's upcoming game. This is Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And good morning. Happy game day, everybody. I'm Gary Harris, and you're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff. Well, Alabama at LSU was originally scheduled for November the 14th, but after the Bayou Bengals had a COVID outbreak, the game was postponed. Well, better late than never. It's on tonight at Tiger Stadium, and we are jam-packed. Let's get it started, as always, with our Bama Headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama Headlines.
Well, tonight marks the first time in 92 years that Alabama and LSU will play in the month of December. The game, as I mentioned, originally scheduled for a few weeks back, November 14th, but that was before the LSU program was hit with an outbreak of COVID-19 cases. So we're going to get it on tonight in Baton Rouge. Nick Saban will be back on the sideline tonight. Alabama's head coach has cleared all COVID-19 protocols, and he says he's feeling 100%. Last week, Coach Saban watched the Iron Bowl from home in quarantine as the Tide beat down the Auburn Tigers 42-13 without him. Well, we've got a jam-packed show. We're going to hear from both sides of this Alabama-LSU rivalry. Also this week, a few former Crimson Tide football stars looking to rekindle the Bryant-Denny magic at the Super 7 State Football Championships. All that, plus interviews with Alabama's Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne, LSU play-by-play man Chris Blair. He'll join us in our Behind Enemy Lines segment, as well as Ken Gaddy, the director for the Bryant Museum. Boy, it's going to be fun today. Well, this was the scene yesterday afternoon outside of the Malmore Athletic Complex. Alabama loading the buses for the short trip to the airport, and then the flight to LSU. Devontae Smith, one of a number of Louisiana natives playing for Alabama and returning to their home state. Landon Dickerson and Miller Forrestall, two senior leaders. Defensive coordinator Pete Golding, he's been a target of Bama fans in terms of criticism, but not lately. That Bama defense has been locking folks down. And yes, as we alluded to, Nick Saban was with the team and traveled on the team flight to Baton Rouge. I tell you what, they got by last week without him, but you always want the man when you're playing in a big football game as far as the Crimson Tide's concerned. Well, some sports betting sites list Alabama as much as a 29.5-point favorite in tonight's game. That just seems crazy. But when you look at it, it's really not that difficult to see why, especially after all that LSU lost from last season and then during this season too. Most of last year's championship squad went on to the NFL, and many of the talented players that did return have since opted out. That includes wide receivers Jamar Chase before the season, and then Terrace Marshall just this week. He is their best remaining offensive threat. Marshall, number 6, announced he was going to leave the program to focus on preparing for the NFL draft.
We all know that LSU has a great passing game. Terrace Marshall is a big piece for that team. But I'm pretty sure they're one of the top schools in the nation. I'm pretty sure they have very many more receivers that could come in and not fill the spot that he had, but fill the spot just as good. And we lost the key receiver, Jalen Waddle, and we had guys step up in that position. And you see the direction we're going right now. So they have good guys over there. So I'm pretty sure they won't miss too much of a heartbeat.
You want a stat that'll blow your mind, even if you're familiar with it, just to hear this stated, I think is going to get your attention. Alabama has not given up a single point at LSU in the last 8 quarters. In 2016, the Tide won a defensive struggle. Quarterback Jalen Hurts scored the game's only touchdown late in the 4th quarter. 2 years ago, Bama dominated LSU 29-0. So 10-0, 29-0. Alabama hasn't given up a point in its last 2 meetings in Baton Rouge. They'd like to keep that going tonight. Here are some trends to keep track of in tonight's game. Just how good was Alabama's defense in the month of November? Well, the Crimson Tide didn't allow a single passing touchdown the entire month. They didn't allow many touchdowns, period. It's been a decade since Alabama lost a game to a team ranked outside the top 15. The last time was in 2010, and they haven't lost an unranked team since 2007. Alabama's favored by, like I said, 28.5, 29, 29.5, whatever you get it at. It's a lot. According to David Purdom of ESPN, no defending national champion has ever been such a steep underdog. This is the largest ever for a defending national champion. LSU is the biggest underdog in the history coming off a national championship. That's crazy. To put it simply, Devontae Smith is a mismatch. A few weeks ago, he set the SEC career record for touchdown receptions. In terms of where he ranks among the best tied receivers of all time, that's probably for you fans to decide in your own minds, but he's part of the discussion with the likes of Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, and other greats. Judy, Ruggs, it goes on and on. Smith is already Alabama's program leader in career touchdowns in the SEC, as we mentioned, could finish as the all-time leader in receiving yards, too. This year in all conference games, he's averaging 14.9 yards reception. He's got 1,074 yards and 72 receptions and 12 touchdowns. He has been phenomenal.
Defenses can try and lock in on Devontae. I don't think it's kind of hard to stop somebody like that. Personally, I think Smitty. I think Smitty is the best player in college football right now.
You know, you can't necessarily argue that. I mean, maybe Devontae Smith needs to be a Heisman candidate along with Mac Jones. All right, I tell you what, Christopher Pipkin, we couldn't ask for better weather here in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, it's a little crisp and cool outside, but it is sunshiny. It's beautiful. It looks like it's going to be that way here all day. What's it going to be like in LSU as well?
Well, yeah, definitely it's going to be beautiful and sunny here, Gary. Not even a cloud in the sky. I'm taking you here on a live look at the Walk of Champions. Can't even see a cloud up there. Bright blue skies, a little crisp and cool, like Gary was saying. Temperatures in those mid to lower 50s at 52. Across much of central Alabama, if you're watching from Alabama, it's going to be the same way. A lot of us in those 50s, lower 50s, we'll be in those mid 50s into the 60s as we get into your Saturday. But what about for LSU? They are seeing some of the similar conditions too. They do have a few clouds that will be pushing into the area, though, as we get later on into today. And around kickoff, we'll see a lot of those clouds really work its way in. Maybe one or two showers, but it's really not going to be too much to affect much of the ball game. But again, they're going to be dealing with those clouds. As for here in central Alabama, we're not going to have to worry too much about that. We're going to stay dry, so take the TV outside. Watch it out on the patio because it's going to be beautiful. In terms of weather for a lot of central Alabama. Now, again, what about for an hour, or at least timing out the Bama versus LSU game in Baton Rouge as they start off kickoff? We'll see temperatures in those mid to lower 50s. Again, those clouds working their way in, but around the halftime hour, we will see those temperatures in the upper 40s. We'll be on the cool side, but I'm sure they won't have any problem playing in that. Coming around the final time, we will see some more clouds coming in. This is only going to increase throughout the evening with temperatures in those mid to upper 40s, still on the crisp and cool side. And maybe one or two showers to talk about. But other than that, it's going to be fairly nice in terms of weather for the LSU and Bama game. We're going to hope that at least they have a great time playing off and to those temperatures. So it's going to be beautiful weather here for at least Alabama and LSU, Gary.
Thank you, Chris, for great football weather tonight in Baton Rouge. A little bit cool. You like it. Still to come on CTKO, LSU's learning a very difficult lesson on winning a championship is one thing, but then carrying it over the next season, that's even harder. And Alabama's focus is on the goals for this season, but that doesn't mean that Coach Saban and the players have forgotten about last year's disappointment and what some perceive as disrespect shown to the Tide by LSU. And Bryant-Denny Stadium welcomes home some former Crimson Tide greats. Find out which former Tiders had a successful return as part of the Super 7 State Football Championships. Stick around. More CTKO right after this.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
You know, nobody likes to get disrespected, and I think when you lose a game, you feel that way to some degree, and I think it's human nature to try to make it right. So I do think that is a motivating factor for most human beings.
And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Well, last season, LSU wrecked Alabama's march to the national championship as the Tigers derailed the Tide in Tuscaloosa 46-41. LSU went on to finish 15-0 and win the national title, and some consider it the greatest season in college football history. Now this year, it's a different story. As we've already talked about, Alabama's favored by more than 4 touchdowns. LSU quarterback Miles Brennan hasn't played since early in the season, and he's out for the rest of the season. The Bengal Tigers' top receiver, Terrace Marshall Jr., opted out earlier this week to focus on preparing for the NFL draft. But Louisiana native Fedarian Mathis says for Alabama, payback isn't necessarily the motivation. They just want to beat LSU this Saturday night because they want to beat everybody.
I mean, it's motivation, but we try not to worry about that around here because, you know, you win some, you lose some. And those guys just played good last year, and we can't worry about it last year. We got to move on from that and think about what we got to do this year so that won't happen again.
I wouldn't say there's a revenge factor. LSU is kind of just one of those, we kind of look at it like they're the next team on the schedule, and to us, the most important game is always the next one. So right now, they're the most important game for us.
We don't really focus on revenge. You know, this year we came in, we've gotten progressively better every week. And then this is just another week for us to get better. We've been practicing hard. Our leadership group has been on us. Our coach has been on us to stay the course, and we've been staying the course. And I like the direction we're going in.
Yeah, I like the direction they're going in, too. Well, Alabama fans and the current players aren't the only ones that remember that the Tigers beat the Tide last season at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Former Crimson Tide offensive lineman Cam Robinson, who is from Louisiana, also remembers, and he wants to see the Tide get payback tonight when the two schools face off. Check out this post by Robinson on Twitter, who's a starting offensive tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He said, quote, "I know Coach Saban likes to keep it classy, but I hope he gives Sark the green light to score 70, end quote. How about that? Well, last season raised the level of expectations for head coach Ed Orgeron in LSU, obviously. And so far, life after Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Joe Burrow and the rest of those stars has been difficult, to say the least. In fact, one media group that covers LSU used the term abysmal to describe LSU's offense in last week's 20-7 loss to Texas A&M. The Bayou Tigers have been forced to play freshmen at quarterback, couple of them, since starter Miles Brennan suffered an abdominal injury 2 months ago. Against the Aggies, LSU finished the game with only 267 total yards and pulled quarterback TJ Finley midway through that contest.
The only reason we pulled TJ was to put Max in and to try some quarterback runs, and we had planned that all week. And we thought that we could get that done, but we couldn't. So we're going to see this week. We're going to practice both of them.
Probably just getting pressure on them and keep them off their balance and, you know, playing fast so they can't think. Just basically just putting pressure on a young quarterback that'll help the defense and all.
Well, one of the players that's looking to be in the quarterback's face is Baton Rouge native Chris Allen. It's taken a little while, but boy, he's really turned it on at Alabama. He leads the SEC with 9 tackles for loss. Allen added 2 more in last week's Iron Bowl blowout of Auburn, as well as 2 quarterback hurries and a sack. He's getting after the quarterback, that's for sure. And you know he'll be extra motivated tonight. All these Louisiana guys on Alabama's roster looking to go back into Baton Rouge and win big. Well, coming up on Crimson Tide Kickoff, Alabama women's basketball scores another win on and off the court. Plus, a behind-the-scenes look at the broadcast for the Crimson Tide men's basketball games, allowing play-by-play calls to come from a safe and social distance. You're going to want to see this story from William Galloway coming up on Crimson Tide Kickoff.
There's 3 teams left this field, 2-1. We're one of the 3. I think we played really good basketball the last 2 nights. I think we got better every single game out. You know, tonight it didn't start out great, but they had some tough shots. Our guys just stayed the course after going down 8-zip. I think we went on a 17-3 run, never gave up the lead from there. So.
And we're back on Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Well, Alabama men's basketball seemed to fix the struggles that it had in Game 1 of the Maui Invitational Tournament this week in Asheville, North Carolina. They got blown out by Stanford on Monday, but then the Tide bounced back to handle UNLV and Providence by double digits. Good enough for 5th place at the Valley Invitational, and like Coach said, they wound up going 2-1. Wasn't the way they wanted to get to 2-1, but they turned it around. Alabama struggled shooting early in the tournament from deep, making just 29% over its 3-point tries, really completely over the 3 games. But they got better as it went along, and that's good. What changed for Nado's team? Well, just the overall feel and effort. The Tide became more comfortable on the court, even when shots weren't going down.
I mean, my teammates, I just seen them respond to whatever coach needed us to do. Like after the first game, he challenged us to be tougher and play harder. And that's what we all came out and did. Just let the game come to me. I didn't try to force anything. I think I tried to force a lot. the first game, and I came out and just played basketball the way I know how.
Remember, there's a lot of new guys being worked into that lineup, and I'm not making any excuses. Stanford handled them way too easily. But for Alabama, this team has an opportunity to get better as it goes, and they're going to be a lot of fun to watch this season. I'm excited. All right, we've seen a lot of changes in 2020, obviously due to COVID, from stadium capacity to no tailgating. All that's happened for all the sports in the SEC. A new policy for the conference for basketball this season is that the visiting radio crews cannot travel with the teams to the destination. Again, this only applies for when teams go out on the road. So our William Galloway spent some time this week with the guys on the Crimson Tide Sports Network crew when the men's basketball team competed in Asheville at the Maui Invitational. Here's William now on how Alabama is calling road games remotely.
I feel like I'm 5 years old again, because when I was 5, I used to watch TV and pretend I was doing play-by-play.
Near side, Shaq, 3-ball is good. Bama 3 for 3 from beyond the arc. Open looks all 3 times.
Chris Stewart, Brian Passing, Tom Stipe, and Roger Hoover have had their fair share of radio broadcasts over the years.
But oh, mercy! Colin Sexton may have saved the season for the Tide!
And now 2020 is throwing another curveball as they call Alabama men's basketball road games from Studio C in Bryant-Denny Stadium.
This is different, and it's not the same, but you know we're getting through it just like a lot of people in this time in the world.
That difference is a challenge, but as an engineer and producer, Stipe is a radio wizard. He's able to maintain a sense of normalcy for the broadcast despite not being on site.
We're setting up like we always do. The court is a large LED screen. I have a direct feed of sound effects from the court. Those are being fed to me by the North Carolina radio crew. I've got a delay box so I can kind of make sure the sounds match the picture so it's not too weird, and we're just going to do the game like we always do.
For now, the crew calls the game off of the one sizable screen in front of them.
It would be nice to have maybe multiple views where we can see a wide shot constantly.
The one screen restricts Passing's ability to break down plays and see beyond the court.
And a lot of times during the play, Chris is calling the action, and I'm looking at the coaches and the players to try to get an idea of what they're communicating to the team. I'm not able to see that. It's not the end of the world, but from an analyst standpoint, it does limit what I can see.
Stewart, Passing, and Stipe have been calling men's basketball games together for 18 seasons now. Hoover joined last year. In a normal season, they travel with the team, stay in the hotel, really just enjoy the road trips and the work that comes with it. How much of those road trips will they miss?
Every slap bit of it. We all love the game, and if we're not there, we're going to be watching it, and our involvement in it will be at the level that people that love basketball will engage with the game, so that part doesn't change.
Reporting for Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm William Galloway.
Thanks so much, William. That's an awesome piece, man. And those guys, they do incredible work. And thanks, William, for taking us behind the scenes and showing us how Crimson Tide Sports Network is getting it done for road games in men's basketball. Well, Alabama women's basketball on the road in Stillwater, Oklahoma today to take on Oklahoma State in that SEC Big 12 Challenge. Now, the Tide improved to 3-0 with an easy win over USC Upstate on Wednesday night. Coach Christy Curry's team also got a victory courtesy of the NCAA when transfer guard Taylor Sutton was ruled eligible and allowed to suit up immediately. Sutton played in her first 2 seasons at Middle Tennessee State, and she was the Conference USA's Freshman of the Year 2 years ago, so she's good. She'll be a big addition to Alabama women's basketball. Well, still to come on CTKO, Michael Williams and Pickens County look to flip the script in the Class 1A state championship game. And Pinson Valley's Sam Shade looks to make new memories at his old stomping grounds in Tuscaloosa. We'll find out how the Super 7 state football championships played out for a handful of former Crimson Tide stars next.
Coach Bryant, I think his strength was taking ordinary players and made him extraordinary. Coach Stallings in athletic vernacular, he was what you call plain vanilla. He just said, we got 11, they got 11, let's line up jaw to jaw, cheek to cheek, and fight it out. And that was a sure influence by Coach Bryant, his being around Coach Bryant. And I think Coach Saban, he realized a long time that it's not X's and O's, it's Jimmy's and Joe's. And he's a great recruiter, and he recruits to a standard. And he's just a consummate football coach.
And welcome back to our WVUA 23 studio inside the Digital Media Center, which is inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. Pretty cool. I'm Gary Harris. The Alabama Super 7 state championships wrapped up last night, and the 6A title game saw a familiar face back on the sidelines of Bryant-Denny Stadium. CTKO's Julia Westerman is live with more now in our newsroom on this former Crimson Tide player's return.
Gary, Sam Shade may have played his last game in Bryant-Denny Stadium back in 1994, but little did he know then that it wouldn't be his last time under the lights in Tuscaloosa.
Sam Shade is no stranger to Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's been 26 years since he last stepped on the field as a player, but Friday night he entered once again with a different title, head coach. Shade joined the Pinson Valley staff in February, replacing two-time state champion Patrick Nix. The departure of such a successful coach was difficult for the team, but Shade made it a learning moment.
The game of football is going to teach you a lot of lessons, a lot of life lessons, and one of the biggest ones right then was change. They went through a coaching change with me coming in and, Coach Nix leaving. So I told them sometimes you're going to have to deal with that in life.
The former Alabama safety may not have had to overcome a deficit in the 1992 national championship game, but Friday night the Indians were down 13-10 at half. They did what they had to do in the second half, which included a 52-yard pass play touchdown to Kool-Aid McKinstry, a 2021 Alabama commit, to retake the lead. Throughout each individual success, Shade emphasized one thing: togetherness.
10 years from now, we'll come back, we'll have a reunion, and nobody will talk about all the individual stuff. You guys just will talk about this team coming together, being brothers, having each other's back. It's just going to be about the relationship that you guys have built.
Shade's 4 years at Alabama crafted his understanding of brotherhood, and his 4 years under Dean Stallings unknowingly prepared him to be a coach himself. With one state championship under his belt, it appears he's on the right track.
Last night's win is Pinson Valley's third championship title in the past 4 years, and the first one for Sam Shade as head coach of the Indians. Live for CTKO, I'm Julia Westerman.
Great job, Julia. Boy, I love Sam Shade, and he's not done yet. Next week, he reports to Montgomery as the honorary captain for the Alabama-Mississippi Football All-Star Classic. The game is scheduled for 1 week from today at Crampton Bowl in the capital city. Shade played in the Alabama-Mississippi Showcase game in 1990 as an outgoing senior from Winona High School in Birmingham. Two other Alabama football alums returned to Bryant-Denny's stage this week. Pickens County head coach Michael Williams and the Tornadoes fell just short in Class 1A. They made it to the championship game, but Linden captured the Blue Map Trophy. It was Williams' first championship game appearance as a player or coach at the school where he played. In Class 7A, the Thompson Warriors got a last-second field goal to stun Auburn, 29-28. That's back-to-back state championships for Thompson and offensive line coach Thomas Rayam. He played at Alabama in the late 1980s. Rayam had a big block against Penn State, you might remember, to keep the undefeated season going in 1989. Well, still to come on Crimson Tide Kickoff, our weekly Byrne Point with Alabama Director of Athletics Greg Byrne. And a little later, we'll go behind enemy lines with LSU play-by-play broadcaster Chris Blair. We'll tell you what he thinks gives the Bengal Tigers their best opportunity to come alive tonight at Tiger Stadium. Stick around. And welcome into this week's Byrne Point. I'm Gary Harris, joined by the University of Alabama Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne. And today, Greg, we're going to have a happy topic to talk about, and that is Bryant-Denny Stadium, the incredible upgrades that were were added to the stadium, the renovations over the spring and summer and in time for the 2020 season. Now, granted, we haven't had full attendance at the games, but what's been the feedback from the fans that have been at the football games that you've heard in regards to the renovations and improvements at BDS?
You know, Gary, overall, it's been very positive. Our folks, all the fans have seen the new video boards, which has been a big hit. The quality of them are so much better than what we had before. They're 60% larger as well. You know, to be honest, I know we had talked about the big board in the south end zone, and that didn't happen because of some significant cost increases on it. I'm glad it didn't happen. I think the new boards in the corners, the way they are something that all of our fans can enjoy and be a part of. Our new premium areas have gone over extremely well. They've been very pleased. The feedback has been good. Obviously, we haven't had them at full capacity. They've been at 20%, just like everybody else. The boxes have been just a little higher, but the club seats and all those different things have been at 20%. And the feedback from those people they've been very pleased with what's happened. The exciting thing, Gary, is we're almost out of inventory. We all the sky boxes are gone. The Lowe's boxes are all committed. The only thing we have left is we're at 83% in our club, in our Champions Club area. So really only have 17% of those left for the 2021 season, when hopefully we can be back to normal occupancy in these areas. So the support for this from our fan base has been outstanding. And so not to make too much of a pitch here, but I wouldn't wait much longer if you're considering Champions Club seats, because they're great seats on the west side of the stadium. And it gave us the resources, Gary, and this is important to understand. It gave us the resources to go and reinvest in our locker rooms at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Mount Moore. It allowed us to reinvest in our softball program. It allowed us to hopefully find a good landing spot for our men's and women's golf programs for the future. It allowed us to improve our recruiting areas at Bryant-Denny Stadium. All of those things allow us to continue to reinvest in our program, compete at the levels that we all know we want to compete at long term, and set that stage for our future. And so the incredibly generous support of so many of our donors who are longtime supporters of our program, we're very thankful. We're very appreciative of.
Absolutely. And again, you heard Greg say, folks, if you're interested in a Champions Club, 83% sold out for 2021. So get in touch with UA now. I want to ask you about the reaction from the students to the new Southside Student Plaza, concessions, TVs, charging stations. What have they had to say about that great area that you built specifically for them?
Well, and thanks for bringing that up. I should have brought it up before, but yeah, the feedback from the students has been good. Obviously, they're reducing capacity. It took them a little while to discover the new student plaza and the new restrooms and concessions. We tried to point them there coming in, and understandably, they were kind of go back to old habits. And so now they are slowly discovering those areas. It's really a first-class area for our students to enjoy. They've got charging stations for their phones. They got a lot of different TVs there where they can watch our game or other games throughout the country. Hopefully, when our game's on, they're in the seats. But that was part of our strategy. Give them a place to go to at halftime, so they don't leave the stadium, and they can charge their phones, and then they can come back in for the second half of the game. And actually, we've been really pleased, Gary, with the way our students have stayed at the games this year. I think all of us, including me, there's an appreciation of not taking this for granted. And I think we all, and again, it starts right here with me, I think we all are guilty at times of saying, hey, you know, we've just always been able to go to games. We've always been able to have 100,000 people in Bryant-Denny Stadium, you know, or a good crowd at Coleman Coliseum for men's and women's basketball or gymnastics, or going to Rhodes Stadium and leading the country in attendance. It's different this year. So I think when we all come back, I really do hope, and I know I'm going to appreciate it even more. I'm going to be even more thankful for this opportunity that we have to all come together, check differences at the door, and celebrate the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Absolutely. And finally, as far as the stadium's concerned, ultimately the players are the ones that perform for our entertainment. And my gosh, from the time the buses pull up the new Walk of Champions into that incredible tunnel that was designed in those locker rooms, I know the players, I've talked to a few of them, have just said they are absolutely thrilled with their new digs.
Yeah, what the new locker room looks like at Bryant-Denny, but then the new tunnel, that was just something that nobody else in the country has that thing. And we were, you know, Reese Davis, so we're so proud of him as being an alum of Alabama. I had talked to Reese and said, hey, I told him what this concept was. I said, I'd really love for you to do the voiceover in it. And he has. We've shown the media, so it's gotten out some, but I can't wait for the time where we can give more tours so our fans can see it. just as importantly, this will be something that we show our recruits. And once you see this in person, I mean, you're going to be ready to – all we got to do is have the scholarship papers at the end of the tunnel waiting for them, because it just makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It just shows the incredible history, the incredible pride and success we've had as a program, and want to make sure we have for many more years to come.
It is phenomenal. All right, that's going to do it for this week's Byrne Point. For Greg Byrne, I'm Gary Harris, and we'll talk to you again on the next edition of the Byrne Point. We're back on Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Well, last season, there was a lot of hype around the Alabama-LSU game from both teams, man. It was some kind of matchup. Now, there isn't quite as much buzz this year, obviously, because of LSU season, but there's still a lot of things to break down, and it's time now to go behind enemy lines. CTKO's William Galloway rejoins us now, and he talked with the voice of the LSU Tigers this week, Chris Blair. William is live in the studio with more. William?
Hey, Gary, that 2019 Alabama-LSU game was really one for the ages, but one thing we all know is that the past is the past, and as Chris points out, you can't relive the past.
But the other thing you have to remember is that that game is over. Neither Alabama nor LSU can bring those points or bring those plays into the game this Saturday. And, you know, that's kind of been, I think, a message that may have taken a little too long to kind of settle in with this LSU team. Not only that Alabama game, but 2019. Those guys are gone. Joe Burrow's not walking through the tunnel.
Joe Burrow completed 31 of 39 passes for 393 yards and 3 touchdowns last year versus Alabama. So far, Mac Jones has had an impressive 2020 campaign, and lots of comparisons have been made between the two quarterbacks.
I mean, there were a lot of spectacular plays that Joe made by extending the play, scrambling out of the pocket, and more times than not, pulling a Houdini on being able to turn it into a big play. Not saying Mac can't do that. He just hasn't had to very often because of the stellar performance of the guys up front.
Last year, the LSU offensive line won the Joe Moore Award for the best O-line in the country. Looking at Alabama's offensive line as a whole, it looks like the award could end up back in Tuscaloosa this season. Alabama won it in 2015.
I think Mac also probably this year, even more so than Burrow last year, has without question Alabama's offensive line. I mean, that allows a guy with the skill set that Mac has, the weapons around him, the fact that he can really, scan the field. He's going to find somebody open. They're just too talented. So I think, Mac benefits from having really a stellar offensive line.
The line has helped propel Alabama to score an average of 48.5 points per game through 8 games this season. LSU will be without their main offensive weapon, wide receiver Terrace Marshall Jr., who opted out earlier this week to prepare for the 2021 NFL Draft.
So it is a big loss. I don't think it's a huge surprise. When you look at the way the season fell with the delays, some of the postponements, the fact they started the season late. I mean, let's face it, this past weekend, normally in a normal year, would have been the final regular season weekend. And the trend has been over the last 4 seasons or so that, some guys opt out, don't play in the postseason, get ready for the combines.
Marshall is currently 3rd in the SEC in receiving yards with 731 and had 10 touchdowns this season. On the opposite side of the ball, the LSU defense is going to have to communicate if they want to slow down Alabama.
LSU's defense this year has been a lot of communication issues. Early in the year, there were, pre-snap, there were people looking around at each other trying to figure out what their responsibilities were, where their coverage area was, and it led to a lot of explosive big plays, 20-plus yards that teams are able to rip off.
And we all know there's no better team in the SEC than Alabama when it comes to making those big, explosive offensive plays. Reporting live for Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm William Galloway.
Thank you, William. There's been a lot of discussion about LSU's 46-41 win last season and the celebration that followed. Some on the Bama sideline thought maybe it went a little too far, but that was last year, and this season Alabama's a 29-point favorite and expected to roll over the Tigers tonight. As far as LSU head coach Ed Orgeron, he hasn't talked much this week about the game last year, but he did say that he has huge respect for Nick Saban and the program that Saban's built and maintained in Tuscaloosa.
Well, he's a great coach. I mean, look at what he's done. And he's done a fantastic job with his football team. You can see the same traits in and out with his football team. Execution, great players, great coaches, great plays. I think that the guy's done a tremendous job with his program.
More CTKO from Bryant-Denny Stadium right after this.
Welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Mike Roy, and we're joined today by one of my favorite people. Ken Gaddy is the director of the Bryant Museum here at the campus of the University of Alabama. I've known Ken for years, and just since I've been here, he's one of the nicest people to work with. And whenever you go visit the museum, see if Ken's around so you can say hi to him. Ken, it's always good to see you.
Mike, thanks for having us on today.
You've got one of the best jobs on campus. It may not be Saban's salary, but it's one of the best jobs on campus, and I bet you'd agree with that.
I agree with that. We get to, we get to talk football and athletics all the time, but we meet so many great people, so many people that love the University of Alabama. That makes it a lot of fun.
I've come to a couple events where former players and different people come back, and it's a celebration of what they did in their lives now, and you get to organize that and be part of that. I know that's a special part of your job, too.
Yeah, the best part of those reunions is to see those guys so happy to see each other, hugging and laughing, and it's really a great event. The fans like to come and hang around and just see those guys.
Before we talk about the good things about the museum, let's talk about the challenges. This year has been so messed up for everybody, and it's messed you up, too, because not as many people can come to campus, and that's affected how many people get to enjoy the museum.
Yeah, first we had to shut down for about 5.5 months when all this started, with people just trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Then we reopened Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we're on a limited schedule to give us days to clean and do those adjustments.
Yeah.
And part of it just, frankly, just staffing, trying to get the staff, enough people there to work a lot of times.
Whether they've actually gotten sick or been exposed to it, every business, every department's juggling with that everywhere in the country. So.
Right. So you're trying to space people's schedules out, and really, the football season has been so different. You couldn't even tell it was a football game, frankly, a lot of those days.
I know.
So that's.
Maybe it makes us look forward to next year.
That's right. So we look forward to having the fans back on campus and get more back to more normal, or the new normal that we'll have next year, hopefully.
You're not just open on football Saturdays. You are open many days, and we'll ask about that specifically after a while. But you will be closed when the university is closed during the holidays. Give us those dates from December.
That's right. We'll work. Our last day to be open will be December the 18th, which is a Friday.
Yeah.
And then we'll reopen on Thursday, January the 7th. So we'll be closed during that time, and we just haven't had enough people to justify it, really.
By having a staff there. When things are better and when everybody's vaccinated and we've put COVID-19 in our rearview mirrors, are you open Tuesday through Saturday, Monday through Saturday? What's your normal operation?
Good question. We actually normally are open 7 days a week, 9 until 4. So this has really got us just a little over half time going right now. So our normal time, hopefully when we get past all this, maybe when it starts to warm up again, we'll be back to that regular 7 days a week, 9 until 4.
I know there are a lot of people watching that have been to the museum and know how nice it is, but it's grown a bit. You always need more space, but you've done some remodeling, more virtual or interactive things. Tell us a little bit about the updates that you recently did.
Yeah, our overall theme is digital expansion. We're not going to pour concrete and those kind of things, but how can we add things in the digital world? So we have a relatively new touch screen, and when you first come in, we moved Coach Bryant's bust out to make it more front and center. And right there up front is a touch screen that has all Coach Bryant's players, not just from Alabama, but throughout his entire career. And you go up there and touch a player, touch a year, and search a player for a year. If you don't know their name, what year they play, we have them alphabetically listed. So there's lots of information there, videos, audio associated. So how can we push more from the collection to the exhibit side through the digital world?
You've been here over 30 years. Have you been at the museum that long?
I've been at the museum 28, another 4 years at the Natural History Museum before that.
Aren't you glad you've been here for the past 10 or 12 with Coach Saban coming? And you were here with Coach Bryant and some other fine coaches in national championships, but this is a special season, this period of time, and I know you're glad you're a part of it.
Yeah, and on top of all the ups and downs through the years, I think this season, what this team has done under these circumstances and to work around all those problems, all the distractions that we have. Can you imagine being a player and having to worry about your family and all these things? So to get out there and do what they've been doing and taking advantage of their opportunities.
This is LSU Saturday. You got any good LSU memories regarding football in the museum? Anything jump in your mind?
The first thing I think of is Sean Alexander down there running wild, really getting his first chance and putting his name on the national scene. And kind of how Alabama has kind of won down there. There was a streak forever that we couldn't lose there, and a streak they couldn't lose here. So how the home field didn't mean a whole lot sometimes.
I want to close with this, and let's take another minute. I know that you love your job, you love this university, but I know parts of it are in here in your heart. I was at an event where Coach Stalling spoke, and when he talked about memories and when he talked about Johnny, I kept an eye on you, and that emotionally affected you because you truly care about those stories, those people that you know who they were and what they stood for.
Yeah, and we got a chance. Johnny worked with us at the museum. We got a chance to get to know him as a person. You know, you kind of see him as that public figure.
Yeah.
But to see him every day, and when break time comes, you want to stop and have some crackers with you. You remember those little things like that. So we got to know him as a person, and those are the type of things that are so special, and you want to remember forever.
And your memories of him, Johnny, are as powerful to you as Namath or Bryant or Saban. They're just as personal and close to your heart.
That's right, and we do that with every player. You talk about the stars, but sometimes those people that played, but people might not remember, they're just as important to us as the big guys.
Well, Ken Gaddy, you're important to us too. We appreciate what you do at the museum. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on CTKO today.
All right, thanks for having us.
It's always good to see you, Ken. Let's go back to Gary.
Thanks, Mike, and a big thank you to Ken Gaddy of the Bryant Museum. Well, the Southeastern Conference season has entered the home stretch, which includes some makeup games that were postponed earlier in the year, as well as a classic rivalry that could use a competitive boost. CTKO's Dylan Morgan breaks it down in this week's Around the SEC.
Last week in the SEC was known as Rivalry Week, and Tennessee versus Florida used to fall into that category. But the Volunteers have only defeated the Gators once in the last 15 meetings, and the chances this week that look to repeat history as Kyle Trask, the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, look to increase upon his league-leading 34 passing touchdowns on the season. This game will be the first time the Volunteers play in Neyland Stadium in 42 days, while on the other sideline, Dan Mullen looks to extend his undefeated record against Tennessee to 6-0 all-time in his career.
Missouri quarterback Connor Bazelak should have a good idea on how to attack the Arkansas defense today, as he will be facing his former head coach Barry Odom, who is now the defensive coordinator for the Razorbacks. Not to mention Bazelak and the Tiger offense are coming off of a hot performance against Vanderbilt as they put up 41 points in the shutout victory, which begs the question, can the former pupil outsmart his old head coach?
And this is the graphic Texas A&M released for its game. It's the Aggie football player who is launching himself onto the soaring eagle, and social media has had a lot of fun with just looking at this picture. And we football fans know what Texas A&M looked to accomplish this season, and let's just say the odds of them reaching the college football playoff, which would likely send 2 SEC teams to the college football playoff, are probably better than the odds of a padded football player catching an eagle in mid-flight. And in one aspect, this picture is very accurate. Texas A&M either comes up with what it's chasing for, or its college football playoff hopes fall flat. With Around the SEC, I'm Dylan Morgan reporting for CTKO.
Thank you, Dylan, and CTKO will continue right after this timeout. The college football playoff is going to look different. The Rose Bowl is scheduled to host one of the playoff semifinals on January 1st, but fans will not be allowed to attend the game. Here's the official statement from the Rose Bowl. California and Pasadena County has strict COVID-19 restrictions in place. The Rose Bowl is set for January 1st. The other semifinal is January 2nd in Glendale, Arizona. The general public will not be allowed to attend that game either, but the Fiesta Bowl will allow families of the teams playing to attend the game. Well, as expected, the Southeastern Conference announced a revised schedule for football games to be played on December 12th as a result of game postponements during the 2020 season due to the impact of COVID-19. Alabama will conclude the regular season against Arkansas Saturday, December 12th in Fayetteville. This week, Arkansas deals with the same situation that the Tide faced last week. Razorbacks coach Sam Pittman will not be on the sideline for today's game against Missouri. It's wait and see if he can or will be there for the Alabama game. All right, let's check in on a final opportunity to see what's going on in the weather with Christopher Pipkin.
Hey, Gary, it's a beautiful day out there. We're seeing some bright blue skies, and it's going to be like that for game day, too. I'll go ahead and show you your game day forecast, though, for the LSU as they're going to face off down there. They're going to be in the 50s. Clear skies and cloudy skies, Gary. It's going to be fairly nice out there, and it's going to make it for a nice, at least, evening for not only us, but them, too. They're going to have clouds increase, but a few showers, Gary.
Well, thank you, Christopher, and you wrapped up the weather. We're going to wrap up Crimson Tide Kickoff, but first I want to remind you that William Galloway will be in tonight at 10 o'clock with all your Saturday evening sports. Of course, the latest on Alabama and LSU. That's coming up tonight at 10 on the news at 10. And then tomorrow night, Julia Westerman will be at the sports desk at 10 o'clock. And at that time, because the game is a night game tonight, it probably isn't going to end till right between 10:15 and 10:30 tonight. So you'll want to make sure and tune in tomorrow night at 10 with Julia Westerman so that you can catch a full recap of the game, plus all the post-game reaction from both the LSU and Alabama locker rooms. That's tomorrow night at 10. All right, that is going to close it out for today. I want to thank our entire CTKO staff and WVUA 23 family as well for helping Crimson Tide Kickoff come off for another Saturday morning. We'll be back with you next Saturday at 11 a.m. to preview the Arkansas game in Fayetteville. I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, everybody. One other quick note in regards to the game tonight. Expect some coaching changes in the Alabama defensive coaching staff due to COVID. It looks as though Mike Stoops and Charlie Strong will both be activated tonight to coach the Alabama defense. Have a great day. Roll Tide.